Waiting for people to join. Oh, hope y'all had a good night. I had a lot of dreams last night. My dreams have been really vibrant. They always are vibrant, but lately they've been like up here vibrant, like messages, lots of things, right? So I wanted to hop on here today and talk about, this uh transformation that we're seeing in a lot of women around body acceptance, body love, what do you call that? Sensuality, uh, expressing their sensual and sexual selves out loud on the internet, all over the place. Um, and how it's been being received because, we're so used to, and especially black women, uh, the clear delineation between the spiritual woman and the ratchet woman. There's been a clear line for a long time because most black women have been indoctrinated into Abrahamic faiths, meaning Christianity, Islam, trying to, and things of that sort, right? So they had an inherent bias against expressing their sensuality and sexuality out loud. Good morning, Tai. Um, and so now we get this influx of women who would normally come from a community who would normally be shunned for expressing these types of values and calling it spiritual. And a lot of people have difficulty um, aligning the two. Hi, Dave. Aligning the two because the way that Abrahamic faiths are designed, and it is a design, the way that they are designed is to teach you that your sexual self is not inherently spiritual, that it is demonic or that it should be hidden, that it should be, just not seen, not represented. And it's this popular saying that's in like all the songs. Since I was a kid, I heard this saying, a lady in the streets and a freak in the sheets. And it's like, how do you get the freak in the sheets if she's not allowed to explore her sensuality? Where is the safe space to get the freak to come out, right? And I think there's like some type of irony there. Happy New Year, y'all! Happy New Year. I think there's some type of irony there. Because if you're teaching me that my sexuality is inherently bad or demonic, how do I show up as a woman in that way in relationship? And if you look at the statistics of straight women who are in relationships, heteronormal relationships with men, most 70% of straight women do not get orgasms from having sex. They have not experienced orgasms from having sex. So they are not even connected to their bliss or their joy in the bedroom. So almost everything that a woman is doing is robotic, is disconnected, and it's out of pleasing someone else, and they don't understand their own pleasure or their own needs. Nice to see you too. And so this is what we're seeing when we see black women and other women exploring their sensuality and their sexuality out loud, because this dormant energy has been around for so long. Um, and the internet has provided this outlet for people to show up. And yeah, they have a disconnected communication, right? Because I grew up not completely Christian, but I had some Christian ideals forced in me, and then um, co- uh, I converted to Islam at some point in my life, and then those things were in me. I had to shed a lot of those ideals to get to the person that I am now. If I would have stayed in those values, I would not be who I am, who you see right now. I would not be comfortable in my skin. I was very uncomfortable, very hesitant about sex, very misinterpreted a lot of things in relationships because I didn't feel like I could say I didn't like something, or this was not for me, or whatever. Ended up performing lots of acts in relationships just to please people. Was very unhappy, very disconnected from my body, didn't know what I liked sexually, didn't know even to tell someone that, move this way or do this or whatever. I felt so insecure about asking for my own needs in a relationship. When I, thank you, when I began to explore myself, and it started as art, right? I started drawing, and I started drawing these visions of women and men that I envisioned, like what love to be. Just someone really like liking themselves, how it looked when you really loved yourself. And I started drawing that. That's when my art started off being like, if this was how I saw myself, how I saw myself when I was alone, how I saw myself when I was in a relationship, what I envisioned for myself in relationship. And I started drawing that. And when I started letting that creativity come out, I started feeling the need to express that in my body. I could only do that in my close friend circle, like with my girlfriends or whatever, right? Like, and then like we would go out and they'd be like, "Girl, do that dance you did, or do the split. You know how to do that split?" And I would be like, I would do it with them, but we out. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want nobody to see me. You know what I mean? And it created this false modesty and this judgment character that lived in my head. And I would judge people who felt free, who felt connected to themselves, and I would harm other women with my judgment because I was not comfortable being myself. And when I started being comfortable being myself, I realized how harmful my thoughts and my ideologies were to other women who were just experiencing themselves, being themselves, and being okay with being themselves. And once I started practicing yoga and started learning about yoga and different types of yoga, and I realized how the spiritual self and the sexual self are actually connected. They're not separate. The way that Abrahamic religions teach us spiritual and sexuality is like they're in two different veins. But the heightened I get in my spirituality, the more heightened I become as a sexual being, as a sensual being. All of these things are connected. They're in the same vein. The love for myself is the same love that I have for what we would call God. It's that. I can, when I didn't love myself, I was always angry at God. I was always asking God, why is this happening to me? I had this victim conversation. Why is my life not the way I want? God, why am I being punished for this? Why? I had this really austere, problematic view of the way God moved in my life. And I constantly believed that I was being punished, that I was being harmed because I wasn't perfect or good enough. I don't understand Spanish, but but thank you for commenting. And so, once I started letting go those ideologies, that God was a harmful, angry, vicious person who was punishing me for not showing up in certain kinds of ways, and started embracing the love for myself, I realized that there was this sensual being, this sensual, sexual, spiritual side of myself that needed to be nurtured, that needed to be healed, that needed to be um, acknowledged. That, that was my job to do that. It was never my partner's job. It was never anybody else's job. It was my job to do that, right? And at first I had a hard time because my beliefs were still stuck on that Abrahamic loop of sexuality is bad, sex is nasty, sex being sexy is disgusting. So I had to break that loop, and it was very hard, in the conversations that I had about my body, because those conversations are also connected to that, right? Like, you have to be this way in order to be sexy. You have to look that way in order to be sensual. You have to be this, all of these things, right? That we're taught to believe about this type of person. And when you don't fit those ideals, then you start to chip away at yourself. So when I started to grow into what was for me and stop comparing, because that's the main thing that a lot of societal beliefs teach us to believe, to have bias against other people and to compare ourselves all the time. We're constantly looking over at other people and trying to figure out how they got what they got, how they get to be like that, who they think they are, XYZ, these types of comparison thoughts that keep us from flourishing in our own way. And when I stop doing that, like I put my blinders on, like I constantly am wearing blinders. I don't know what nobody else is doing. I don't care what anybody else is doing. I cannot be concerned with what anybody else is doing. As long as they're not harming me, they're good in my, they can do what they need to do for themselves, and they're not harming me, themselves, or another person. This is where I have to start looking at them, right? But the comparison game is a big part of that Abrahamic faith that we pass on. Like, we're constantly trying to be better than other people. We're constantly trying to outdo somebody, constantly trying to one up someone. And it takes away from our innate gift. It takes away from who we are naturally, the beauty that we have to offer. It takes away from that. It dampens it. Hi. It makes us small and negative and hard and angry and frustrated. We don't have time to be grateful. We don't have time to be in love with ourselves. We don't have time to think about ourselves in a beautiful and kind way, or to think of others in that way either, because we don't have it for ourselves. When you don't have it for you, you damn sure don't have it for nobody else. That's the one thing that I know is the truest thing I've ever heard. If you can't do it for you, you can't give it to anybody else. That's why a lot of us walk around with resentments and anger and frustration, because we're constantly trying to give to other people what we wouldn't even do for ourselves. Because we're expecting, that's how relationships work, right? Like, if I do this for you, then you'll do it back for me. But that's not how it works. I only do for others what I'm willing to do for myself. If I'm not willing to sacrifice for myself and I'm sacrificing for you, is that honest? It's manipulative. And that's how we're taught to be in relationship with one another. We're taught to manipulate each other into spaces of love and niceness. It's not an authentic expression the way we're taught to love. And when I started loving myself authentically from a real clear space, right? Like, I like me for what I have and who I am, not no additional frills, no add-ons, no, extra shit. Things changed a lot. Things moved differently for me in my life. And when I stopped adding adjectives and descriptions that I had learned from other people and judgments that I had learned from other people about me or about people who looked a certain way or things that I perceived to be a certain way, then my spiritual self evolved. It evolved. I rarely, if ever, judge people, even when people are being really interesting. I like to say, "Ooh, that's interesting," because it gives me food for thought. The more I see people who have opposite opinions of me, the more I want to know how they got to that um, ideal. I don't want to like just make it, oh, this is the type of person this person is. I want to know what happened. How did you get to this frame of reference? What made you get to this space? Because I'm more interested in learning about you as a human than prejudging you and fitting you into a box. I'm gonna read what Catrice said. And some people will decide not to love themselves authentically because of the crowd they're around. I tell my 11-year-old daughter, don't change yourself because of what your friends think. And yeah, and that's just such a hard, Ricardo, I really wish I could read your um, comments, but I cannot. They do not translate to English. Um, that's such a hard age because that is the age. I have an 11-year-old too. That's the age when we are supposed to be like, grouping and pairing and learning to make friends and all of that stuff. And so it's like a natural way to be, to want to be liked, to go along with the crowd. And I have one of those. I have a little 11-year-old, and she loves to be liked. She loves to have people tell her she's cute and she's funny and she's smart. She needs that reassurance, even though she gets it at home all the time. Her dad and I, her grandparents, we affirm her all the time. I think it's a personality trait, right? Because yeah, she gets all that. She's a ballerina, she's really good at it. Like, she gets a lot of affirmation. And it's just, I think it's that age range that's like like 11 till about 25. You just really want friends. Like, you really want to fit in. Like, it's a part of that developmental stage. Because we do not technically, some people are saying 30 now, we do not technically become adults until our prefrontal cortex develops, and that is around 25 to 30 years old. So we are constantly taking information and cues from things outside of us because we're not developed, we're not sound developmentally. And this is why I'm so big on allowing your kids to be children for as long as they need, because the way we were taught to grow up is not really valid. I used to work in adolescent healthcare, and adolescence is a fairly new frame of reference for even the medical community to consider adolescence as a stage. And that goes up to 25 in healthcare system. You can cover your kids on your insurance to 21 to 25 because they're adolescents. Not because they're your child, but because developmentally they're still children. And that is I think it's like a 70, 60, it's just as old as Black people having rights. That's how new it is. So if you can imagine children being thought of, young people being thought of as children and not people who can go work and get a job, and Black people having rights and being able to vote and being considered human, are almost the same age. That's the frame of reference I like to use when I think of young people and Black people, like as far as healing is concerned. Neither one of these groups had autonomy until the last 60 years, which is really interesting. Right, interesting. So, when you have something that's that new, it takes we all are developing how we learn to deal with it. And even thinking of yourself, not letting spiritual your religion dictate how you get to show up as a human is a fairly new concept. Even spirituality is a fairly new concept for most people because we are religious based. This is a religious based society. We live in a Christian, well, I live in a Christian country. America is a Christian country. And so getting people to think of themselves as spiritual or soul based is even harder because of religious doctrine and how long it's in the fabric of this country. Everything about this country is based on Christianity. Everything. They would say there's a separation of church and state, but there is not. I remember saying the Pledge of Allegiance when I was a kid and say all types of weird things that should not have been allowed because it's just, if there's a true separation of church and state, then these things shouldn't have been introduced to me in school, right? Even, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. But so when you're thinking about ratchet, like, and is there a thing as ratchet? Yeah, there's a thing as ratchet. We know there's a thing as ratchet. We know what ratchet looks like. We know when someone's being ratchet, right? And most people who are being ratchet will tell you, I'm being ratchet, or you can feel they're being ratchet. But because our lens is so narrow around spirituality and religion, we have a hard time understanding when someone's being sensual and their sensuality is being expressed versus being sexual, right? Sexuality and sensuality are very hard for us to separate because there's certain parts of sexuality that are only perceived as there's certain parts of sensuality that are only perceived as sexuality, which is not true. You could someone's eating an orange and someone will think that's sexual, but it could be a sensual experience for them because they are sensing, using their senses. They're using their tongue, they're using their taste, they're using their hands. Those are sensual experiences. Anytime you're using your senses, you're having a sensual experience. And because we have a very limited view of sensuality, it becomes a sexual experience. That's the thing that I was really getting to. When you see people expressing themselves, moving their bodies, like really feeling their bodies, feeling their spirit in their bodies, that's a sensual experience. But we have a hard time delineating that from a sexual experience because anytime we see bodies, we usually think of sex. We usually think of intimacy in the bedroom. And so we have a very limited view of the body. The body is very only used for one thing. Even if you see someone exercise, I see all types of videos, people doing nothing that has to do with sex, but because they have a big butt or large breast or their penis can be seen in their shorts, they have a print. Everyone's brain goes to sex, 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 sex. Why? Because the way we are informed about sex is as something that is hidden. So it's always in the back of our head waiting to be seen, to be heard. But if we embrace our sensuality and our sexuality, then we won't see sex and sex in everything. It helps, it cures that, I'm going to say disfigurement, because I think it's a disfigurement to always see sex in everything. And a lot of us don't realize that we are functioning that way. We just think this is normal. I see stuff all the time. I don't even see sex. And then I'll look at the comments and I'll be like, oh, look at her. She looks like she's about to do that. Or I put stuff up on my page and people are like, oh, the way you scooted up, I thought you was about to. Why? Why does body language for you automatically signal sex? I'm not in the bed. I'm not naked. I don't have a sex toy. I'm not with a man doing any sexual act. But if I move my body a certain way, here comes the thought of sex. Because we are not in touch with our sensuality. We don't know how it feels to be in our bodies. We don't understand what an experience is with ourselves. We don't practice being with ourselves long enough to experience ourselves in a way that is deeply sensual and just full of gratitude for our bodies and for ourselves. So when we see somebody else having that experience and posting it, we automatically go to, oh, this is sex related. This person is trying to sell sex. No, they have 1-800 and 900 numbers for that. They have OnlyFans for that. People who want to sell sex have direct ways of selling sex. They can tell you. And it's just, I find it really interesting that we have such a hard time valuing people when we don't understand what they're presenting. That's why I'm so big on just really, I see stuff like TikTok is one of those places where I go and I'll see something and it'll intrigue me. The person will intrigue me. I'm like, oh, what is this? So I go to their page and I'll look at everything because I want to get the totality of what they're presenting to the world without making a decision about this person. Because it's not my job to make a decision about this person. It's my job to figure out what they're showing me. They're telling me in their videos. They'll tell me, one of their videos will tell me, this is what I'm about. And I'll see it. And I'll say, oh, okay, so this is what this is. And I can take it for what it is and not place my own description on it. I can allow this person to be what they're saying they're being. It takes a lot of practice, but it's healing. Because guess what? This also works in relationship. Personal relationship with my kids, relationship with my parent, relationship with my friends. I am never misinterpreting what someone is saying to me or someone is doing because I allow them to show me, to tell me. I'm not making it up in my mind. Oh, you're doing this or you're saying that. I'm asking them, what does this mean? What does this look like? How does this work for you? How does this include me? What do you need from me for this? What is my role? Yes, I ask my children these types of questions. I have real conversations with them. I do not assume they are doing anything. A lot of times when I was little, my mother assumed all types of horrible things about me because that is the way she was taught to parent. She was taught to think the worst of her children, to be in competition with her children, to always be worried about her children doing something to her. This is how we were taught parenting, a lot of us. We're taught to dominate people who we deemed as weaker or dependent on us. That's how we were taught because we got it from slavery. Yeah, that's where it comes from. And this is the same relationship that men have with women have with children. Dominance. It's always about that power. And when you remove that lens, thanks, Catrice. When you remove that lens, things change. You can see people for who they are, what they bring to the table, their value system. The competition leaves. People have a hard time seeing me be able to have a conversation like this, and then seeing me do yoga in my shorts and my bra because my ass is fat. Because, you know, I can't actually have a brain and think things through because I'm shaped a certain kind of way. It's very weird. These are the thinkings. This is how we're taught to think. You can only be one thing. You can't be more than one thing. You only can fit in this box that I give you. And when you get out of that box, I don't know what to do with you. So I devalue you. I say negative things to you. I am harmful to you. Because I want you to get back in that box. Power. Dominance. That's how we're taught relationship. And when you release that, your life changes. Your life changes. And this is what spirituality has taught me. How to release power. You're always at choice, so you have infinite power. You don't have to assert it. Peace, Bonafide. Long time. You're choosing your every move. That's power. You're choosing your words. That's power. You're choosing how you get to show up in any space you go in. That's power. You don't have to wield it like a hammer. I know we are taught that. Again, comes from slavery. Everything we are taught that is harmful was already done to us. It was a device used on us to keep us in line and to keep us subservient. And then we use those same tools in our relationships with others, in our relationships with our children, in our relationships at work, in business relationships. It's a weird way to be. And then we wonder why God, or the God that a lot of us believe in, is angry. My God is not angry. My God does not punish me. And when I believed that, when I had that belief all my life, it lived up to that. I felt like I couldn't get a fucking break. I felt like every day was a challenge. Constant overcoming something, constant challenges, constant drama, trauma. Am I saying I don't have issues? Am I saying I don't have difficulties? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't see them the same way I saw them before. I don't see them as something I have to constantly conquer. Everything in my life comes along to teach me how to grow, how to be better, how to nurture myself, how to nurture those around me, and how to empower myself and those around me. Not as a lesson, not as a foot on my neck to keep me down, or for me to show my obedience. I don't know if y'all ever heard of Osho. It's one of my favorite spiritual teachers. He has this thing, it's like crazy wisdom, right? So that's his thing, crazy wisdom. I kind of ascribe to that on some level, but I also ascribe to some Taoist theories. And Taoism is a whole nother thing. One day I'll talk about that. But crazy wisdom is like, you just roll with it. Like you're not like fighting life. You're like, this is what the fuck it is. This is what the fuck it is. Just like that. Spiritual people can say, fuck, this is what the fuck it is. That's crazy wisdom. And so what am I going to do? Am I going to allow it to run its course? Most times that's what I do. Most times I allow things to run their course. Most times I find when I interfere, I create more shit. Let it run its course. I learn something. No one gets harmed in the learning. Usually when I interfere, someone gets harmed, mainly me. But I hope this was helpful because, you know, as this exploration of the physical from women, and especially black women, is only going to get larger. It's only going to become more expansive because a lot of black women have a lot of trauma, a lot of negative self-beliefs, a negative harmful ideologies in their mind and living in their body and living in their experience, and they harm other black women. And as they heal, because they have no choice, because a lot of black women are healing, they will be exploring themselves. They might not share it online, but they will be exploring themselves because it's normal. It's not a negative experience to see yourself. And it's not a negative experience to see yourself as sexual or sensual. It's a spiritual experience. We ain't come here through a magic flute. We came here through someone's vagina. A spiritual experience. So I hope this helps. And I hope it helps those people who like to come to my page, even though I don't engage with you, who leave negative things in sexual comments. I'm never ashamed of what I present to the world. And, you know, if you want to have a conversation about expression, wonderful. But your view is not always the view. Oh, thanks, Catrice. I'm gonna hop off here, and I hope y'all have a good. It's Thursday, right? It's my kids' first day back to school. That's why it's so quiet in here. Lord, the snow is melting here in Maryland. Finally, we were covered in snow. I appreciate you, sis. So I can actually go outside. It's still cold as hell. That's the only thing about living on the Eastern Shore, right? You always, this damn weather. So I'm going to see y'all later. And I hope this is useful to those who are looking to heal any trauma, any negative self-talk conversations, or any issues they have. You know, they're like, if they're deconstructing Christianity, Islam, and all those Abrahamic faiths, if you're deconstructing those things in your life, meaning that you're releasing and you're disconnecting from some of those beliefs and biases that you have and you've been living with, this conversation should help. You're welcome, Bonafide. I'll talk to y'all later and have a beautiful day, okay? Oh, before I hop off, it's the last day of my sale on my jewelry. Use code 2022. Everything's 30% off if you're interested in crystal jewelry. I have to do it. I have a business. I appreciate you guys. Talk to you later. Peace.